Hey, poker people, it's Sky Matsuhashi, and this is the Smart Poker Study Podcast. In episode 157 last week, I discussed the 5 benefits we gain from paying attention to every showdown, whether we're involved in the hand or not. That episode is not to be missed, so make sure you downloaded it. Hello, it is poker study time, y'all. I appreciate you tuning in today and sharing the show with a friend, or even 7 friends if you got them. So today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audible.com/smartpokerstudy. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, including both of my books, How to Study Poker Volumes 1 and 2. And I am so extremely happy that all 3 versions of my new book, How to Study Poker Volume 2, are now available at Amazon. Yepers paperback, which is my favorite version of any book I read, the ebook, and the audiobook are all right there for you. And thank you to all who've already purchased the book, I appreciate it. And another thanks to the fine poker peeps who have already left a review, like this one right here. This is from Amazon customer, so it's an anonymous review, but it is 5 stars and a verified purchase. Amazon customer went on to say, "Wow, the second in the series does not disappoint." Sky begins by saying that this book is for you if you're an online player willing to dedicate yourself to an hour of study and an hour of play every day. If you can do that, huzzah, gambate, bully for you. I know I can't. But if you can't either, this is still a book you must read to get to the next level. For a fraction of its hourly coaching rate, you're getting a goldmine of useful techniques to get you thinking about and improving your game. If you're an online player, his information about filtering Poker Tracker 4 stats is worth the price of admission and then some. What I love about the book and Sky is that his dedication to learning inspires me to learn more about the game and deliberately practice. I don't have an hour a day to study and an hour a day to practice, but when I do play and practice now, I have a plan, a checklist, the structure I need to be a better player. Keep on keeping on, Sky. Your star is shining. Wow, thank you so much, Amazon customer. You know, based on that review, if I wasn't the author of this book, I guarantee I'd be at Amazon.com right now and I'd be buying it. And if you've already purchased the book but have not left a review yet, please do so. Then screenshot it or type it in an email to me so that I can read it on air. I do appreciate all of those honest reviews, especially the 5-star reviews. Thank you very much. And then so that actually brings us to today's podcast. It's an excerpt from the audiobook. This is day 2 of the book. The book itself is broken down into 28 days of study. And in this day number 2, I discuss how to hand read the villain in a hand, and I give you a link to a video that demonstrates this. I then discuss an article I studied and share with you my notes on the article. And lastly, I dive into my database to learn ways that I can improve my game. So please visit the show notes page for everything I discussed today, along with screenshots and links at www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod159. While you're there, you can sign up for the weekly boost for exclusive poker strategy direct to that inbox. Alrighty, let's hear me talk some poker. Gambate!
And now for our feature presentation.
Welcome to day 2 of study. Today's agenda contains 4 parts. The first, hand reading practice. The second, lessons learned from an article called Poker Hudstat, Cold Call Preflop by myhold'empokertips.com. Part 3 is a database review, hands where I was called preflop. And part 4 is today's play session plans. You can find links to today's study content at www.smartpokerstudy.com/volume2links. Go to day 2. The first part of today's agenda, hand reading practice with the villains range. Hand reading is the most important skill every strong player must develop, so I practice this at the beginning of every study session. I know that this daily practice has made me a better player, and it will do the same for you. The critical thinking I've developed through improving this skill has translated into better on-the-felt decisions made. I use Flopzilla in every hand reading practice I do. If you don't have Flopzilla yet, I highly recommend you purchase this indispensable program at www.flopzilla.com. The best way to show you how I use Flopzilla to hand read is in video form. so please access today's Villain's Range video by going to www.smartpokerstudy.com/day2handreading. You can also find a link to this video within Day 2 of the Volume 2 links page. Also, I like to use SplitSuit's hand-reading templates to help me track how I narrow ranges through the streets. Using these sheets also forces me to continuously think about percentage form and the number of combos in a range. You can see how I use them in today's hand-reading video, and you can get a copy of the templates by donating an amount of your choice at splitsuit.com/templates. And if you'd like more information on hand reading, please listen to my hand reading minimum effective dose series of podcasts, which start on episode 149. In today's Villain's Range hand reading video, I'm dealt pocket queens in the cutoff, and I open raise to 3 big blinds, which prompts the villain on the button and the 2 blinds to call. The villain on the button is a 29-17 player. What is he calling this 2-bet with? The flop comes down, Queen of Clubs, 5 of Spades, 4 of Clubs, giving me top set. Time to get some value. I c-bet 2/3 pot, and only the button villain calls. What parts of his range make this call? The turn card is an offsuit 5, pairing the board and giving me a full house. I bet 2/3 pot for value again and get called. What parts of my opponent's range calls on this board? Finally, a 10 of clubs comes on the river, completing a possible flush draw. I make a smallish value bet and get paid. What hand ended up paying me, and was it within the range I narrowed him down to? You'll have to watch the video to find out if I narrowed my opponent's range correctly. Part 2 of today's agenda, lessons learned from an article called Poker Hudstat, Call the Open and Cold Call Preflop by myhold'empokertips.com. In this part, I'm going to share with you the notes that I took from studying this article. As I take notes, I'm not just recording things that the article, the podcast, the video, or the book chapter discussed, but I also add my own thoughts and opinions into the mix. I think this is a natural thing to do when you're learning something new. You're taking your prior experiences and applying them to the new information coming in. By lumping everything together, you'll be crystallizing your thoughts around this one subject. An important note: I recommend you study this content for yourself, then come back and listen to my notes from this article. Don't treat my notes as the perfect takeaways from studying the item at hand. It's possible there's more that you can get out of the article than I did. So here are my notes from this article. Cold calling is calling a raise with no money in the pot. You can't cold call from the blinds. So here's a question I ask of myself. Why use the cold call stat as opposed to the call 2-bet stat? You're better off using the call 2-bet stat because it gives you more information. Call 2-bet shows the times that you call in every position, blinds included. Good strategy is to call with tighter ranges than you would open raise with. When you just call, you're getting to the flop without initiative, so your post-flop bets have less fold equity. Stronger ranges help to make up for this. As the opener, you have fold equity on your side, so wider ranges are okay when you are the raiser. As the caller, you're simply relying on hitting a hand, and as the caller, you're often out of position, so tighter ranges will lead to more profitable post-flop opportunities. Your opponent's 2-bet call percentage shows you the range your opponent is calling with. Make sure to take away pocket queens or better, and sometimes ace-king or ace-queen, from their 2-bet calling range. You want to target players who call 2-bets a lot. Anything over 15% is great. Some players call over 40% of the time. The higher their 2-bet call percentage is, the weaker and more passive they are. The stronger the player, the less often they call 2-bets. A calling range of only 5%, for example, is pocket queens down through pocket deuces. As players add more hands to their calling range, you'll begin to see broadways and good suited cards like suited connectors and suited kings and aces. Anything below 15% is comprised of pairs and strong hands that are not willing to 3-bet. Part 4 of today's agenda is a database review, hands where my 2-bet was called pre-flop. Now everything you're about to hear might be a little hard to follow, but I do have some figures on the images page that could help you out. Please go there right now. In many study sessions, I review my database. It's not the same process every time. The way I go about my review will change depending on the theme at hand. Because this week's theme is assigning accurate 2-bet calling ranges, I'm going through my database and looking for instances where I raised pre-flop and faced a call. I'm analyzing some of my weakest opening hands from the early position and how they fare versus 3 different 2-bet calling ranges. The first range is a tight 5% calling range. The second range, a looser 13% calling range. And the third is a very wide 33% calling range. I use Flopzilla religiously for this kind of equity work when I'm comparing hands versus ranges. I started my review by running a filter for open raises without facing a 3-bet, and you can see this in Figure 8 on the images page. This resulted in 290 hands to review. I looked through the hands I played, and the worst king was King-Jack suited. The worst ace was Ace-Deuce suited, and the worst suited connector was 7-6 suited. Let's take a look at these three hands and see how they fare versus the 5%, the 13%, and the 33% calling ranges. So now we use Flopzilla to analyze the worst king that I opened with from early position, and that was King-Jack suited. Versus the 5% 2-bet calling range, King-Jack suited has 47% equity pre-flop. And you can see this in Figure 9 on the images page. Versus a 13% range, it's roughly the same equity at 48%. This 13% range adds some hands that dominate us, like Ace-Jack and King-Queen, but conversely, we dominate their suited connectors. And versus a 33% 2-bet calling range, King-Jack suited has 57% equity. You can see that the wider the calling range, the better our King-Jack suited fares against it. If we use Flopzilla to see how often King-Jack suited hits top pair or an open-ended straight draw or better, it hits 40% of the time. Ultimately, King-Jack suited fares very well against the three calling ranges we're analyzing. But before opening it from early position, always consider the players still in the hand and how they will react, and have a plan for their potential reactions. Now we can use Flopzilla to look at Ace-Deuce suited, the weakest ace that I open from the early position. This hand has terrible equity versus a 5% 2-bet calling range at only 33% pre-flop. Against a 13% range, we've got 43% equity, and you can see this in Figure 10. Versus a 33% 2-bet calling range, our Ace-Deuce suited has 51% equity. Ace-Deuce suited hits the flop only 30% of the time. And remember, hitting the flop is top pair or better, and an open-ended straight draw or better. Thinking about the Ace-Deuce suited, it has good enough equity to open in early position, but just because it's good enough doesn't mean we should open it every single time. You need to take into account the table dynamics, the players yet to act, the images of the players involved, and how you think everybody will react to your open raise. If it seems to be a positive EV open, then go ahead and make it. One of your goals in poker is to make poker easy. You're going for positional advantage, card strength advantage, and skill advantage. If opening Ace-Deuce suited in early position will give you all three, then great! But if not, reconsider opening with this hand. It might be best to open it in later positions. Now let's look at 7-6 suited, the worst suited connector that I opened from early position. 7-6 suited has 34% pre-flop equity versus a 5% 2-bet calling range. It has 39% equity versus a 13% range. And the 7-6 suited has 41% equity versus a wide 33% 2-bet calling range, and you can see this in Figure 11. 7-6 suited hits the flop 30% of the time. Regarding suited connectors, it's good to be able to show up with these as an opener in early position, but in early position I wouldn't go below 7-6 suited. Having suited connectors in your early position range, along with pairs, suited aces, and some broadways makes you less easy to read. But be careful opening with them on an aggressive table, where you can expect to get 3-bet quite often. Unless you're willing to come over the top with a 4-bet, or just make the call, don't open from early position with the suited connectors. We've been looking at how often our hand quote-unquote hits the flop. While we're at it, and because we want to understand calling ranges better, let's look at how often these three ranges hit the flop for themselves. Remember, hit means flopping top pair or better, and the open-ended straight draw or better. A 2-bet calling range of 5% hits 31% of the time. Remember, that 5% range was pocket queens down through pocket deuces. A 13% range hits 31% as well. And the 33% 2-bet calling range hits 28% of the time, the least frequently of all of them, and that can be seen in Figure 12. And I know all of that may have been difficult to follow, so if you weren't following along with the images page, go back, listen to it again with that page open. And you might as well open up Flopzilla and do the work right alongside me so you could see those same percentages and how I arrived at them. And part 4 of today's agenda is the play session plans for later today. I use a physical journal and do a warm-up and a cool-down pre- and post-session. The number one reason for warming up is to get into our A-game mindset. We remind ourselves of why we're playing, the skills we're currently working on, and our important focus for the session. We do the cooldowns to reflect on the session. We record any lessons learned, any mistakes made, and any tilt experienced and why it came over us. I decide ahead of time how long I'll play and how many tables I'll play. I also pick a specific strategy focus, as well as 1 or 2 HUD stats related to that focus. I really like my 5-minute question as well, because it helps to keep me focused on some important aspects of the game. The logic statement is there to help me deal with rising emotions and potential tilt. If you want to learn more about warm-ups and cooldowns, check out episode 5 of the podcast by going to www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod5. Within that podcast, I lay out all my thoughts on warm-ups and cooldowns. You won't be hearing these types of entries every day within this volume, but I do have them scattered throughout to remind you of the importance of warming up and cooling down. So today's pre-session warm-up, this is what I wrote down in my journal. The format for today, 25 NL, 2 tables, and I'm going to stream it on Twitch for 45 minutes. My why for the session, to improve my hand reading skills. What mental state am I in? A, B, or C game? Striving for A game. My strategy focus for today? Assigning accurate 2-bet calling ranges. My HUD stat focus? The 2-bet call percentage. The 5-minute question I'll ask myself every 5 minutes. Is this table still profitable? If the answer is no, then I'll leave the table. And my logic statement for the session. My skills will win out in the end. And after the session, I record my post-session cooldown in my journal. Here's what I wrote. Rate my play. I gave myself an A. Great decision making, assigned and narrowed ranges through the streets. Lesson learned. Wide 2-bet calling ranges are very hard to predict. Take notes on what your fishy opponents call with buy position and bet sizing. Any tilt experienced? None! I stayed calm and collected throughout the session. This concludes the study session for day 2. Thank you so much for listening today. If you can type the words Smart Poker Study, you can find me on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now on Anchor. You can also hear the show on your Amazon Echo device. Just tell it to play the Smart Poker Study podcast on TuneIn. And of course, send me those emails, sky@smartpokerstudy.com. And I've got to thank once again our sponsor, Audible. Something special for my listeners. Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You can get my new How to Study Poker Volume 2 for free, or maybe even Volume 1 for free if you'd like. Both are currently available at audible.com. Or maybe download another great poker audiobook, like Peak Poker Performance by Dr. Trisha Cartner, or How to Be a Poker Player by Hasib Qureshi. To download your free audiobook today, go to www.audibletrial.com/smartpokerstudy. Again, that's audibletrial.com/smartpokerstudy for your free audiobook. Alrighty, poker peeps. Next week in episode 160, I'll hold another Q&A session with 3 new questions and answers. I've been getting some great questions recently, and I want to share my answers with all of you. Word of mouth is the best advertising, so thank you very much for sharing this show with other poker people. Your sharing and caring is what helps us grow. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.